Welcome to Innovators, a series where we sit down with thought leaders across the healthcare space to discuss some of the industry's most pressing topics. Joining me on this episode is Brian Benscoter, Principal Solutions Architect at AWS. Today we're going to talk about Agentic AI and the impact that it's making on the healthcare space. Thank you so much for being here today, Brian.
Oh, thank you, Justine. Happy to be here.
So to get started, everyone is talking about AI these days, but as we're looking at Agentic AI specifically, can you explain what Agentic AI is?
Sure. So one way to think about this, right, is with the topic of AI, and I think more specifically generative AI, we introduced this idea of prompting a large language model, and it could take that information, formulate a response based on what it was trained on, and provide back an answer. Where we're evolving is through multiple stages, first with AI agents and Agentic AI as an encapsulator of that. We're combining multiple agents into what we would call an Agentic AI system. But really what the term Agentic AI is referring to is the AI is having the ability now to kind of reason, to search for additional information, to be iterative in approach, as opposed to sort of a one-shot answer response. So more intelligent, reasoned, thoughtful task achievement through using this new technology.
All right, now looking at AI in healthcare, we know it's growing rapidly, but how are you seeing it used and where is it adding the most value to our space?
Yeah, I think one of the greatest areas of opportunity and where we're seeing growth is healthcare itself has so many different siloed sources of data, right? So a challenge for somebody working in this space where I need to operate across those many different silos, if we're accomplishing that in, say, a typical analytics workflow, we usually have systems like ETL that's extracting that data, transforming it into another format, putting it into a common data store, and then we're giving people the access to that data and having to put the proper guardrails and identity protections around it. An advantage, or where I see the agentic AI augmenting or improving this space, is now we can have agents that are working against and understanding all of the different data sources. We can ask questions of the AI in more natural language, and it can formulate those complex technical queries, execute that across the proper data source, and then compile that information and get it back to the original requester. So we're sort of moving along the technical challenge, or bringing the, say, an analyst closer to the data with less, say, technical engineering expertise required in between. That's really, I think, one of the greatest opportunities that I'm seeing today.
And when we're looking at how AI is being infused into so many areas of healthcare, there is this concern with AI replacing human jobs. What would you tell a healthcare professional who has that concern right now?
Yeah, I hear that a lot myself. Being a father of a college-age child, I have the same types of concerns of what opportunities are out there. And what I tell people is it's really less about the AI replacing you and more about somebody who understands how to work with the AI potentially taking your job. So really the opportunity is understanding this new technology. How is it that I can learn it, how I can use this to improve my own efficiencies? So like we talked about already, we have the data examples, right? If I understand how to work with the AI, can I do my job more effectively? If I'm, say, a clinician and we're developing systems around this, instead of going through and researching across 5 different areas, maybe I'm understanding how to leverage this technology better so it can come out and augment a lot of what I would have to do manually today to fetch that data, bring it back in proper summarizations, and provide the information more rapidly to me. So now I'm being more efficient in what I'm able to achieve, but I still require that human engagement to actually produce the final value back, right? There's no replacement for the empathy and the understanding of an actual human in these settings. So rather than being replaced, learn how to use the technology, put yourself more at a competitive advantage, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely. And that goes for anything outside of AI. You've got to stay up with the things that are, helping any industry. So I think that's a great point. But you talked a little bit about being more efficient. So tell me what does more efficient look like?
Sure. Maybe an example would be if we look at something like we're evaluating a claim before we send that into, say, Medicare or Medicaid. There's lots of requirements. There's coding that has to be identified in it. There's an understanding of what might be the supporting documentation that's needed based on the type of condition that we're looking at. Becoming more efficient would be, let's remove the multiple humans that need to go through and review all that documentation, which instead of taking minutes, that probably compiles up to hours in some cases if there's enough to go through. If I can process that through an AI and get to the core pieces of data that I need right off, I'm able to reduce that timeline from hours down to a collection of minutes, right? And now, how many more patients or how many more claims can I process as the human who's working in this process to get those through end to end within a cycle? That's an idea of efficiency, at least as I see it.
So you kind of touched on this, but maybe some more examples of the greatest opportunities of where to apply those efficiencies?
Sure. A couple areas come to mind. So if we look at an area like prior authorizations, that process has multiple checkpoints involved in it that typically involves, say, we have the source request coming in. We're going to evaluate that, look at that against things like what are the potential payer requirements that need to be met. We need to evaluate what is existing in the claim that might be a gap. How can we go out and find the supporting documentation beforehand, right? So if we're applying more of an agentic system process against this, we can define multiple agents that are really good at certain specialized tasks in that area, and then orchestrate that with another agent that's able to hand off and fetch the appropriate, pull this all together, get together that whole package that we then send in to get the authorization done. Plus, taking it another step, we now can monitor how that authorization is processing. And if there are denials, let's address and escalate those earlier. So time to value or time to actually getting the authorization through can happen much more quickly. Another area is in this concept of, say, a health agent. So in some of the things that we've looked at with Inovalon from the AWS side is how do we approach looking at what might be more considered, say, a deterministic type of output where we're evaluating a claim and looking at medical history to identify what are the relevant coding items that we need to find within the documentation to support a specific hierarchical condition code. So that's a big mouthful. Hierarchical condition code. So leveraging the AI, it has a better understanding of context. So a traditional ML system, we're going to process it through. It's going to identify words and map particular codes to it. When we're using this with something that's based on more generative AI, it can look at a broader perspective of all of the content within that document and understand that maybe it's not just this particular phrase that leads to a code, but is it relevant based on the actual patient we're talking about versus history or the time in history where it went from. So being able to do those kind of human level reasoning aspects and provide that information back to a final approver really shortens the amount of effort that goes into performing those types of evaluations.
And, that leads me into this next question more around this patient-centric kind of a view. In healthcare, we're dealing with patient lives, so each decision has critical impact. What measures do you think that we can take to leverage agentic AI safely?
That's a very important question, right? So to me, there's a few aspects of it we have to consider. So one is that even though we're creating systems with a new technology that has intelligence and its own capabilities right out of the box, it's still a software system. So we need to make sure that we're applying those same types of concepts that we would to building any other type of software system. We should have identity and access management. We should make sure that the users and the various tools that make up this system only have access to the information that they should. On top of that, though, we want to wrap in different types of guardrails. So a guardrail is a way to put, say, protections against both what we pass into a large language model as a prompt, as well as filters against what's coming out. So this can be something that's very common, like looking for PII information. We can identify that up front. Let's make sure that we don't let that leak out either into the LLM or back out of it. But taking it a step further, one of the primary concerns with, at least in the early phases of large language models, is that we're asking it a question. It's basing some of this on its training, and there might not be specific training to the question we ask. So it takes logical leaps, or it can take a logical leap, and hallucinate an answer. So we want to make sure that we're getting more deterministic answers that are grounded in truth. So using things like automated reasoning as part of our guardrails allows us to evaluate the responses against actual grounded foundational data that we want to work from, so that it can evaluate the responses to make sure that these are actual truths rather than something that the model itself is trying to formulate on its own.
So there are definitely ways to make sure that that safety and that guardrail is really put in place, which is great to know. There's been significant progress around AI in healthcare, but let's look forward at the future. What do you think that the next major advancement is going to be?
Yeah, so I think this concept of agentic is growing. Some of the forecasts out there talk about 35 to 40% of the marketplace by 2028 is going to be leveraging some form of agentic AI. So where there's opportunity, especially if I think of an organization like Inovalon, there's so much data that's going through your systems today. How can we make that data more available to our customers? And if our customers are moving into this agentic AI space and they're building systems that are built around those, how can we enable access to this data in new ways that actually facilitates their functions performing better? So if I think about an agentic system where one agent is orchestrating across multiple, I see a marketplace where data owners and providers are now granting access to that data through an agent that they make available through some marketplace. So now, rather than having to go through those complexities of granting access, creating the SQL queries, and making sure that we're able to merge our data without releasing specific information, let's put that intelligence into the systems and let the systems interact at that level so they can make the requests, get the relevant information they need back with all of those proper guardrails and security controls. But we're really accelerating time to value and hopefully breaking down a lot of the data silo challenges that have always kind of existed in the industry.
All right, Brian, before we close today, and you've certainly shared a lot of great knowledge and insight here, but there was one idea, lesson, perspective that you hope our listeners carry forward when they leave this conversation today. What would that be?
Yeah, I would say the one thing that in talking with any customer, I want them to think about how they apply this technology to solve new problems without abandoning kind of the core concepts of what building a proper software system is. Because where things fail is where we don't evaluate all aspects of a well-architected design. We want to make sure that we're understanding the costs, the performance, not just the functional aspects. Because if we create something that's super intelligent and provides these very accurate answers, but our costs to achieve it don't match the value that we're generating back from it, there's really no value in the space. So look at the technology carefully, evaluate it as a fit as part of an overall application design process, and I think you'll find that there's a lot that you can do and actually start turning these projects around a lot faster with much more higher success rates.
All right. Well, Brian, thank you so much. Really appreciate you taking the time to join us today. And for all of our listeners, thank you for tuning in, and be sure to follow along for more conversations on the innovation that is shaping the healthcare landscape today.